Hello, this is Dr. Rhadi Ferguson. I'm a 2004 Olympian, a 4-time national judo champion, a Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu black belt, and an instructor, author, teacher, and coach. Right now, I would like to discuss with you some things that I saw at the last Olympic Games in terms of judo. I believe if we looked at the judo game as it is now, as it was before, we can see a lot of contrast in how judo has evolved and changed in the terms of international judo play. When we look at international judo play, we can clearly see that some of the newaza time that we've seen at the Olympics is comparable to what we saw during the 70s and the early 80s, and very different from what we had going on during the 90s. Right now, if you are not invoking more newaza in your judo practices, it is probably an error from what you've seen on the international landscape. Now, the major thing that I want to talk about preparation. Let's talk about preparation. How about we look at this? Look. Let's take two competitors, okay? Competitor A, and we take competitor B. Okay? I'm not an artist, not at all, okay? I was an engineer in college and I'm pretty good at free body diagrams, but when it comes to artwork, no good. Okay? So we have competitor A, we have competitor B. Now, both competitors practice, both competitors train, both do uchikomi, both do nagekomi, both run, both lift, both have excellent coaches. That is not where the kazushi is going to come from in terms of the off-balancing. To create the imbalance that you need in order to win at the higher levels of competition, you need to do the cognitive work. You have to do the cognitive work. The best thing that you can do is, if you're person A or person B, find out as much as you can about your opponent on and off the judo mat. When it comes to on the judo mat, you want to look at the tendencies, you want to look at the throws, you want to look at the newaza movements, you want to look at their on the mat movements, you want to look at where the person practices. You want to do a kind of a recon analysis, if you will, which we just call scouting, okay? So the number one thing that you want to do is you want to scout your opponent. You want to scout your opponent. So how do we do that? And it's an easy way to do that. You can go to www.judoscoutingreports.com. Go to www.judoscoutingreports.com. I'll walk you through this whole process, but let's get back to it. The first thing you want to do is you want to scout your opponent. Scout your opponent. The first thing. Okay, I said I want to go over a couple things. I want to go over 3 things. The second thing you need to do, after you scout your opponent, which is the easiest thing to do because it's very easy to identify problems in someone else, okay? You have to scout your opponent. The next thing that demanded is probably the most difficult thing to do because it rocks you at your core. Because everything that you believe in, everything that you think is going to work, everything that you know, all the chips that you put in, you may find out that you've done some things incorrectly or that you may have to change some things as they sit. So the second thing you need to do is after you scout your opponent, you need to scout yourself. Now, more often than not, the eyes can only see what the mind can comprehend. So this is usually where my colleague and I, Chris Round and I, get hired in order to do scouting for other people, because sometimes you just don't want to sit down and admit some things, and then sometimes you just don't want to hear it. I think a 2-time Olympian, 2-time or 3-time Olympian, Otto Bolden, he's a commentator for NBC who does track and field and he coaches. He said one of the most difficult parts about coaching is coaching your friends. Because you have to tell them things that they just don't want to hear. And they especially don't want to hear them from you as a friend. But the most important part of this process, I can tell you right now, is scouting yourself. It's cool to scout your opponents, but you got to scout yourself, because once you scout yourself, it will make you go back and scout your opponents again, because now you have to scout your opponents with the understanding that your opponents are scouting you. Okay? So, scout your opponent, scout yourself, and then the third thing that I want you to do is you have to scout the sport. Meaning you have to scout judo as it is. That means you have to scout the refs, you have to scout the rules, you have to scout the unwritten rules, and you have to scout the current tenor of play. Meaning when you watch the Olympics, from the first day when you start watching Olympics, you start saying to yourself, okay, this is how it's going to be called for the day. Or this is how the Olympics are going to be called. All right. If you look back at track and field, you'll notice that at this particular Olympics in 2016, if anything happened bad on the track, they put people in races, they let people do some do-overs, they tried to keep people's Olympic dreams alive. If you watched the judo, you saw clearly that if there was any controversial call, they didn't make it. They let the people play, and they let the decisions of the match be decided by the players. I truly think that wrestling could have probably taken a hint or two from judo in that respect. I think sometimes no calls are better than making calls that are controversial. But staying on point, what you need, please visit www.judoscoutingreports.com and get these 3 things done that will definitely help you improve your judo game. Scout your opponent, scout yourself, and scout the sport. And whatever you do, don't do what a lot of non-professionals do. Don't think that you can just figure out everything by yourself. Everything in the world is not available on Google, and everything in the world is not available on YouTube. Those are just the hardcore facts. I mean, if that was the case, we'd all just be able to go to YouTube University, and that's not the case. You can get introduced to judo through YouTube. You can get introduced to newaza through YouTube. You can really find out how to build some cool stuff on YouTube. But there's still some things that are not in the general domain, they're not in the public domain, that you need to understand. Okay? There's general knowledge, then there's specific knowledge. When it comes to specific knowledge, you have to go to those people that have that specific knowledge. Create the kazushi that you need to create by not being general. Become special. And if you want to exist in this special population and the elite population, then you're going to have to do some special things and some elite level things, which are just different from the general things. Going to practice is just a general thing. Everybody, if you look at everybody on the mat, all of them are at practice. If you ask yourself, who on this mat is actually sitting down, watching the film and doing the scouting and writing down the reports like I am? There are not many people that are doing that. That will take you from being general to being special right away. So if you want to improve your judo game right away, go to www.judoscoutingreports.com and make the small investment to become an elite level judo player today. And remember, you don't become elite overnight, but you do make the decision to become elite overnight. Scout your opponent. Scout yourself. And scout the sport. Please visit www.judoscoutingreports.com.